Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Hall here for the local ballot charter amendment initiatives that'll be on there. I want to thank you all for choosing to be here this evening and taking this responsible action to learn about this information, gather this information yourself, and then be able to take it out and share it amongst your own networks. We're going to open this up with Grace and Peace Fellowship's own Pastor Mike.
I never get applause on Sunday morning, so thanks for that. Good evening. My name is Mike Browning. I'm the pastor here at Grace and Peace, and just want to welcome you all here. It's a privilege for us to offer our building for this meeting. It's an important meeting. So one thing I want to cover is where the restrooms are. So if you go out either of these doors, if you go out this door, you'll turn right. You go out this door, you'll turn left, and the restrooms will be there. There are also some downstairs at the bottom of the steps when you turn right, if you don't want to walk down toward the front. But yeah, we're really excited to be a part of this meeting here tonight. And as a pastor, it is my job, according to the Bible, to pray for the leaders of our city and our government. So if I can have a minute to do that now before this meeting. Holy God, we ask that you would bless these leaders and the work that you've given them to do as our aldermen and alderwomen. I pray that they may do their work in a spirit of wisdom, kindness, and justice, and that you would equip and help them to use their authority to serve faithfully and promote the welfare of this great city of St. Louis. We thank you for the privilege of being here and for the work that they're doing. Bless this night. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you.
Okay, I want to make sure I introduce myself. My name is Shamim Clark-Hubbard, and I humbly serve as Alder Lady in the 10th Ward in the city of St. Louis. You're in the 10th Ward, so welcome to the 10th Ward. I'm proud to say I am Grace and Peace Fellowship's Alder Lady, too. And we're also joined today. I'll start by acknowledging our colleagues that are here, President Megan Green, Alderman Aldridge, Alderman Browning, and I want to note that Alderwoman Velazquez will be joining us after another event. This conversation is led by you all. It's led by comments and questions that were offered prior to this meeting, but also I want to make sure we reverence that forms to ask questions this evening are still available in the vestibule. So if you have questions that you want to ask, that you might want to ask via card, or we'll be opening up the mics later, please make sure you go and get one of those forms. With that, we're going to start with an introduction, an overview of their propositions that are on the ballot. Again, these are the citywide propositions. I want to make sure I don't say it enough to share this information. This is how you empower yourself with the facts about what these amendments mean and what they will mean to the city, to our beloved city here moving forward in progress. And so when we share this information, it not only empowers you, but it empowers the people that you share it with as well to be ready for November 5th, unless they're voting early, which don't forget, you can vote 2 weeks early with no excuse, or you can vote tomorrow if you want to, if you have an excused absence. So we'll start with President Megan Green.
Thank you. This on? Okay. Thank you, Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard, for moderating tonight, and thank you to everybody who is spending your Monday evening with us. The reason why we're here tonight is because the November ballot is big. If you have looked at your sample ballot, you know that it is several pages long this time around. And while the presidential race and a lot of the statewide seats get a lot of attention, rightfully so, voters locally are going to be asked to weigh in on 5 amendments to the Missouri Constitution and statewide initiatives to raise the minimum wage, as well as a number of local initiatives. So tonight we want to make sure that we are educating about what those local initiatives are. Because we have 4 local initiatives that have the potential to change how our city addresses its housing crisis, how we address vacancy, how we address street safety, how we make sure that residents have more say in our budget process, And while the board has worked on various legislation regarding housing or vacancy or street safety, we know that sometimes in order to adequately address those things, we have to look at them from more of a big picture systems level. And that's what our charter does. Our charter is our constitution for our city. It is how we govern ourselves, and our charter is pretty antiquated, and it was made in 1914, and a lot has changed since 1914. So we want to make sure that we are creating a city charter that spells out the powers, responsibilities, limits of our government, but does so in a way that works with today's modern environment. And by updating our charter, we can address a lot of these issues from that bigger picture systems level. So the one initiative that I'm particularly going to focus on tonight, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues to do the same, is the short-term rental fee, or Prop S. So Prop S, it will set a 3% fee per occupied night on short-term rental properties. So this is a user fee. It's not something that the Airbnb host or owner pays. It's something that when somebody books a short-term rental, they will pay that extra 3% on their bill, and that will go, 50% of the fees that are collected from that will go to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and the other remaining will go to other housing initiatives like relocation assistance for people who get evicted through no fault of their own, counsel for eviction defense, and a number of programs that can help keep people housed and keep them off the streets. And so we want to make sure that, we do know that since there have been kind of a proliferation of short-term rentals in our city, it has taken a lot of rental out of the marketplace. And when that happens, it rises rents throughout our city. So the reason we are taxing it and giving it to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is try to offset some of those negative consequences that are associated with the proliferation of those short-term rentals. But this is not a very large fee. For example, if a unit is $100 a night, 3% of that cost would be an additional $3 per night. So we're not looking to break the bank. This is very similar to what we see in other cities. And we know that can help generate some necessary funds that we need to develop more affordable housing in our city, to make sure that more people are staying housed, or if they are housing insecure, that they don't find themselves on the streets, because we're doing those interventions that we need to do to keep people housed. But with that, I will now turn it over to Alderman Aldridge to talk a little about himself and Prop B.
Hello, how y'all doing this evening?
Good evening.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. One, because I'm in the power of 10. So if you have Alderwoman Clark as your Alderwoman, she does amazing work. So you guys are very lucky. I learned a lot from her. Luckily, my office is right next door, so I get to ear hustle too on all the ways she's making the city great in her neighborhood. So I can also copy that and try to do it in the 14th. So my name's Rasheen Aldridge. I'm the Alderman of the 14th Ward, which is kind of downtown west, downtown. It is also Columbus Square, Old North St. Louis, Carr Square, Hyde Park, a little bit of Fairground, a little bit of JVL, and College Hill. And I'm, like I say, super excited to be here to talk to you guys about Proposition B. So Proposition B, when you think of B, think of budget. We kind of named all of these in a way that is catchy to folks. But Proposition B does two main things. I think it's probably one of the most simplest propositions that's on the ballot. It allows the Board of Aldermen to have the ability to increase within the budget. So right now, the Board of Aldermen, when we meet with different departments, we only have the ability to decrease and then make a recommendation to ENA to increase. So you probably ask, why is that a problem? For several reasons. One, ENA gets a budget roughly around January, and they start going through the budget. They ask departments like Slate, who's here under the leadership of Ms. Frederica, doing a great job, and other departments to turn in a budget. After they turn in that budget, they have one community hearing session. After that community hearing session, the budget's voted out, then it goes to the budget committee. Under the leadership that we've had under our current budget chair, we really dive deep into the budget. So we have departments come in and we say, what's going good, what's not going good, and how can we make sure that taxpayer dollars are being spent effectively. We have probably 2 months of just meetings of deep dives and listening to different departments. And then we have about 4 meetings out in the community. We try to make sure that we're inclusive. We go 2 north and 2 south. And after we come up with input from department heads and from community members that say, hey, we may need more money in refuse, or we need more money going to Slate because they are, sending our young kids putting our young kids in a position where they're actually getting a job after that, we as alders try to then advocate. So we can advocate by decreasing. Maybe we see a department that has a lot of vacancies and they're not going to use that funds, and you have a department that will be able to use it. Unfortunately, we cannot really increase. We only can make a recommendation. So when you look at other municipalities like Kansas City, or when you look at St. Louis County, or when you look at municipalities like Clayton, and I served on the state level and I served on budget for 5 years, even the state of Missouri, if it's the House or the Senate, they can increase and they can decrease the budget. But we are like this only nuance in St. Louis that cannot increase. After we try to make a recommendation, we have this very archaic process where if the Board of Aldermen makes any recommendations, we then have to, and when I say beg, we have to beg ENA to have a meeting so that they can approve the recommendations. And if they approve those recommendations, it goes back to the board, or it goes back to the committee, and then the committee votes it out and send it to the board just to make sure that we send it to the mayor before July 1st. And I'm really proud of this Board of Aldermen, because for the last 2 years, under the leadership of President Green and this whole board, we've been able to send a budget back to the mayor in time. And I can't say that for all Board of Aldermen, but this board has done it because we are serious about making sure that taxpayer dollars are being spent in an effective way. So what Proposition B does, again, is it allow for your alderperson who's, as I always say, we are the boots on the ground. If you got an issue with potholes, if you have an issue with refuse, if you have an issue with a vacant building next door, I'm sure you're not calling the mayor. I'm sure you're not calling the comptroller. You may call the president, but most of the time you're calling your alderman and emailing your alderman. And we're the ones who try to make sure we advocate for those resources through the budget process. And that's what we're asking, to be able to have the authority to advocate on behalf of our constituents by increasing and cutting out that process. So once the Board of Aldermen get the budget in committee, if we make any changes, it goes straight to the board and then it goes to the mayor. So it cuts out that time frame, about 2 weeks of it just being stalled and sitting out there where we don't know what's going to be the next step. So again, when you look at other government, like the president said, we haven't really touched the chart in a very long time. This is an archaic process within the Board of Aldermen when it comes to budget authority, and we're asking the voters on November 5th to vote yes on Proposition B to make this process flow better, and also to make sure that your alderman can actually represent you in a way when it comes to the budget process, which when the board gets a budget, we only get the budget one time a year. And that's what we're asking during that one time, to be able to advocate on behalf of you to make sure that dollars are going into the right department. And now I would turn it over to the amazing alderman from the 9th Ward to talk about Proposition T.
Good evening, everybody. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, and it's a beautiful evening, and it's good to see you all. I am Michael Browning. I am the alderman for the 9th Ward, that is the Central West End, Forest Park Southeast, Kings Oak, and a little bit of the Vanaventer neighborhood. I'm here today to talk to you about Proposition T, which would create St. Louis's first Department of Transportation. Why do we need a Department of Transportation in the city? Well, since 1914, as our president mentioned, we have had the same language in our charter dictating a streets department. And that streets department only focuses on the maintenance of our streets right now. But this is a true thing about our city. Our streets right now are dangerous and they are poorly maintained. And that is partially because we have a very fragmented structure for handling these things, as well as different departments that have different responsibilities. But there is no single department in the city of St. Louis whose responsibility is your safety out on our streets. No matter how you get around, you deserve to be able to get around safely in our neighborhoods and out in our city. And this proposition is aiming to fix that problem. So what does Proposition T do? Well, we're not going to change 110 years of doing something the same way completely overnight. So the first thing that Proposition T does is it changes the mission of this department. It makes sure that we are accommodating all road users, no matter how you choose to get around, whether it's on the street or the sidewalk, whether it's on a scooter or a bicycle or in your vehicle, making sure that we're protecting people of all mobility, making sure that we are focusing on the areas of our city where people are getting hurt, and making sure that we are making those areas safer for everyone. It also adds planning into the description of this department. Right now, if you know how our streets are paved and how we decide which streets get paved, you know that your alderperson decides. Well, your alderperson will get in a truck with someone from streets and they'll drive around, they'll say, this street's pretty bad, I think it should get paved. And that system has worked when our wards were smaller, and it worked when we had more money available and more people to fund that department, but it is falling behind, and I don't think I need to tell you that. You can drive around these neighborhoods and see that for yourself. So this is aiming to give planning capacity to the department so that we can create a paving plan, so that we can focus where is the pavement in the worst condition, where are the streets most dangerous, and apply money and resources to those areas. A paving plan will also help us do things like coordinate with the utilities. How often do you notice that that's not a pothole you just went over, it's a utility cut, or one of those metal plates that is there for a few months as they do work. Right now, the utilities don't know what street we're going to pave next, so they just do their work when they're going to do it, and sometimes that means they're going to carve into a street that we just paved. That's a waste of your tax dollars, and it leaves you with a pretty poor condition street. So a planning division in the Department of Transportation would help address that. It would help make sure we can implement the transportation mobility plan that the mayor's office is currently conducting. It's a great plan. We've never had a citywide plan before, but a plan is just a plan until we have a department that can implement it. So make sure we can implement things like that. Our ADA transition plan, because we know that disability in our lives is a when and not an if. Maybe you're in a car accident, maybe you're just recovering from a surgery, or maybe you're up there in age and you're just not as agile as you used to be. If that's the case, you shouldn't have to take the street instead of the sidewalk because the sidewalk's all busted up or because a ramp isn't available where you need it. So this department could focus on properly implementing that plan, and it could also make sure that we're very equitably spending on our sidewalks so that we can take care of everyone in our city no matter how they get around. So Proposition T, if you vote for it this November, will set us on a timeline to transition the streets department into a Department of Transportation. It will add a lot of good things into the description of that department, like planning and the safety of all road users, and it will change the name of that department to be more encompassing as the Department of Transportation. This will all happen on a timeline taking full effect on July 1st, 2029. And I know you're thinking that's far away, but again, we don't change 110 years of doing something overnight. So we are going to hopefully pass this November, and then from there, it'll be up to the Board of Aldermen to build out that department over the next 4.5 years with ordinances. And that's where we need you to keep the pressure up. If you like this idea, then we want you to not only vote for it this November, but keep the pressure up on your alders, because we're going to need to make sure that we're allocating the proper funding, that we're being able to pass the proper policies that go along with this department and give that department the capacity in order to make your streets safer.
Thank you, Michael. And until Alderwoman Velazquez gets here from her other engagement, I'm going to stand in the gap and talk a little bit about the last proposition on the ballot, and that's Proposition V. And think V for vacancy. I know all of us are concerned about vacancy in our city, right? We drive down way too many roads and we see way too many vacant houses that can bring down the property values. It decreases tax revenue for the city. And it also damages neighborhoods. They end up being fire hazards and safety hazards. And so the city has been pretty intentional about working with a lot of our local nonprofits and organizations that are working to address vacancy. And through those conversations is where Proposition V came from. So Proposition V would update the charter to allow higher fines for violations involving vacant and deteriorating properties that are not owner occupied. So these are strictly vacant properties, nobody is living in them. Currently, the maximum penalty that can be assessed on a vacant property is $500. That was set back in 1970. $500 might have been a lot of money back in 1970. It might have, incentivized some folks with deteriorating houses and some land speculators to, do something with their property when they got that fine. But today, what we're seeing is a lot of speculators in particular, they just write off the $500 as this is a cost of doing business, and then they allow the property to continue to rot for years and years and years. And so it makes it very difficult to hold a lot of these out-of-town property owners accountable for the condition of their properties. So what we are looking to do is we would remove the $500 cap on vacant properties from the charter and instead empower the Board of Aldermen to set appropriate fines through ordinances. We want to, and the reason we're delegating this authority to the board rather than just increasing the fine amount in the charter is because this may change over time, right? We haven't revisited this since 1970, right? And so we don't want to wait until, the year 2100 or whatever to come back and to do this and to update it. And so doing it through the ordinance process still allows for that community engagement and still allows for folks to come and testify, at the board and contact their alderman about how to vote on it. But it gives us a little bit more flexibility in setting what that fee structure looks like. So for example, maybe we set a fee structure where if a company owns a lot of vacant property, the fines go up for the number of vacant properties that they own. Or maybe we set a system where the longer that something is vacant, those fines go up over time. Like what we don't want to do, and I want to make this very clear, we are not going after homes that currently have people living in them. We are not going after, the intent is not to go after, that family home that's been caught in probate court for years and years and years. We know, things like that happen. Who we want to be holding accountable are these out-of-town LLCs that continue to come in, buy up a lot of property in our city, hold it vacant for years and years and years. And when the city tries to get them to do something with it, we either can't get a response or they just, quickly pay the fine and wash their hands of it. Meanwhile, our neighborhoods continue to suffer. So Prop V would eliminate that. It would give us more flexibility, more tools in the toolbox to hold some of these problematic property owners accountable, to make sure that we can kind of enhance the vibrancy of our neighborhoods and better tackle the vacancy issue that we have throughout the city.
Okay, so you guys have now received that overview of the 4 initiatives that we're going to speak on tonight. You're going to get more information. This will be a great time to share. Text your neighbors. Tell them that they can. As a matter of fact, can we give STL TV a round of applause for being here today? This is always above and beyond the things they do for us. So thank you, STL TV. And again, this is being live streamed on the STL TV YouTube channel. And I also want to note that in the vestibule, along with questions that you can ask yourself, forms rather for questions you can ask yourself, there are vendors out there that you can carry that information back to your networks to the St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment, led by our very own I'm calling her Dr. Frederica McGlowan, on the work that she does at Slate. And neighborhood stabilization is out. Yes, absolutely. She deserves a round of applause. And that workforce development and things that she does at Slate, very out-the-box thinking and being able to meet people where they are. Thank you for your continued service to the city. The neighborhood stabilization team, Alderman Aldridge mentioned that you call us for potholes, but you also call your Citizen Service Bureau and your neighborhood improvement specialists. And I know that they are out in the vestibule as well. So here, you can get this information and put in a CSB service request if you need to. In conflict resolution, that goes without saying what we might need that for. So I'm just letting you know that those things are there, and we'll go ahead and start with the questions. This one, we're going to have President Green lead. What % of voters is needed to approve charter change propositions?
So in the city, 60% is the magic number. So we have to have 60% of voters approve a charter change in order for it to take effect. So that's one of the reasons we're out here pounding the pavement. It's not just a simple majority. It's bigger than that, which means all the more reason we have to be out here talking to as many folks as possible.
Absolutely, and making sure that again, some of these things haven't been looked at as far back as 1914, leading up to 1970, and so making sure that we get out here and share this information and get our people to the polls to have their voices heard is so important, so that we can get to that threshold, so that we can meet these needs here, because holding vacant our communities for that vacant properties, as President Green, and not only do they hold the vacant properties hostage, but they hold our neighborhoods and our communities and our neighbors hostage as well. So I would like to, with that being said, recognize Alderwoman Velazquez, who has joined us now. And so we'll bring her right into the conversation. And so this one is going to be led by Alderman Aldridge. How often can a formal city charter review happen so that amendments can be proposed?
So as long as it's a general election, there's two ways that these amendments can be proposed that becomes a charter change. And remember, the charter, like the president said, it's our Bible. It's a Bible for the city of St. Louis. And we haven't changed in a very long time. That's why we had this charter commission. That legislation was passed last session, and they took a very good deep dive into a lot of different things that we need to change, and some of these are ones that we're talking about today, but it could be done through two processes. So either an alderperson can sponsor a bill with the three initiatives or four initiatives that are in front of us today, or it could be done by the people. So if the people get enough signatures, they could be able to get enough signatures to try to get a charter change within the city, but it's only on the general election where that charter change would exist.
Thank you. This question we're going to have led by Alderman Browning. Regarding the Department of Transportation, what will happen to the transportation-related roles in the current departments? Will jobs be moved or lost? Will there be additional funding, or will it be reallocated from existing city budgets?
That's a great question, and I think it's important to acknowledge that there are lots of positions all over our government right now. That's part of the problem, is the fragmentation that exists, right? There's maybe 3 different departments that routinely touch streets each day. That's the Board of Public Service, the Streets Department, and even the Planning Department, all the way over in a separate section of the government. We also think that the Sustainability Department and also the Office of the Disabled are important in discussing transportation-related issues. All of those offices will still exist. We want to make sure that people understand that those positions do other things too, and so those jobs are still going to exist, similar to all the jobs that are currently in the Streets Department. We still need people to pave our roads, patch potholes, repair our sidewalks, pick up our trash, fix our street lights. All those things are still people we need, and we actually need more of those people. So if you know someone looking for a job, we are hiring. But those jobs are all still going to exist. What we're really talking about is building the capacity of this new Department of Transportation. So if anything, we'll be adding some jobs. But as I said, we're not going to start big and just change 110 years all at once. We're going to start small by adding a planning division. That's going to give the new department the capacity and the ability to really go out and start acting in a smarter way, making sure that they're using that budget to maximum effect, pairing it with grants, making sure that we're able to really make an impact and make your roads safer where we can. As for the second part of the question, will there be additional funding or will it be reallocated? We are looking to reallocate funding at this time. So when I spoke of the fragmentation that exists, part of that fragmentation is how we currently pave streets, which is through 2 different funds: St. Louis Works Money, which is a tax that currently exists in the city, and Ward Capital, which is a half-cent sales tax that then gets divided into 14 different wards. Well, the problem with dividing money for the streets into 14 different wards is you don't travel this city by ward. You don't go around this city and think, I'm going to go from the 9th to the 10th to the whatever. You travel it by road and you don't really think about it. And those roads shouldn't be subject to that fragmentation or whether your alder cares to make that street safer or has another demand for that money. So part of this is going to be reallocating some money that currently exists in those 14 different pots and trying to put it all towards one purpose so we can create a paving plan. It's going to be a big part of this new initiative is to create that paving plan because it solves a lot of problems. But we're also hoping that that money can be used then to pair as matches with bigger federal grants. Right now, if we try to do a street project, it can take 5 to 7 years in order to do a traffic safety improvement project out on our streets. To put that in political terms, that's maybe 2 elections, meaning that your alderperson could retire or they could, just decide that they don't want to do anything about it or they could get unelected. And then that money that they've been saving up to do something could disappear. So a lot of projects often don't ever happen. We get a design, but they don't actually get done. Think about it. You've probably seen a few plans come around for the streets in your neighborhood that then you wonder what happened. Well, that might have been what happened. So the idea here would be to make sure that we can maximize the small amount of money that our city has and pair that with federal and state grants so that we can really make bigger projects happen that really result in the safety of people out on our streets. So reallocation of money, and it's important to mention that any new taxes that exist in the city are going to have to be passed by you, the voters. So we're not trying to sneak anything through here. We really are planning on just paying for this by reallocating money that already exists.
Thank you, Alderman. This one is going to be led by Alderwoman Velazquez. How can residents feel comfortable that Prop V will not negatively impact renters or homeowners who live in their houses?
Great. Thank you, Alder Lady Clark Hubbard. And I know I just got here. I just want to say thank you all to you for being here. You could be doing a lot of other things with your Monday night, so we appreciate your engagement in these important issues. So one thing about Prop V, Prop V is obviously for vacancy. That's how we've been talking about it. And when we originally drafted this bill, it was actually taking out the fee for all, or the cap for all fees. And we got some pushback from community members saying, hey, especially in the context of 10 years after Ferguson and knowing that our region has had a history of criminalizing people who may not be able to pay for things, that's not what we want to do. So the law is actually narrowly tailored to address vacant and deteriorated non-owner occupied property. That is really important because it's non-owner occupied. So none of the laws that we could draft, and I'll get to that in a second, but none of the laws that we could draft once we remove the cap are for homeowners. This is really targeted toward absentee landlords and absentee property owners. So, as I think was mentioned here earlier, Prop V is really the first part in a bigger set of changes. Prop V removes the cap and authorizes the Board of Aldermen to write a new set of laws. So what that also does is that there is going to be, as you know, since you are engaged, it will involve the whole legislative process for whatever pieces of the law, whatever things that we create or whatever ordinances that we propose will have to go through the legislative process. It won't just be the Board of Aldermen saying, hey, we want to charge this for this. It will not be that. So there will be the robust public engagement process. If you are here tonight, you were probably very engaged with issues related to vacancy and development anyway, so I know that Alder Lady knows very well that HUD's meetings are often robust and filled with conversation, so there is no reason to think that any bill related to this would be anything otherwise. So I think really what we're trying to do here is go after or really focus our efforts on the consistent bad actors. That's why it's non-owner occupied, because we don't want to unjustly harm people who are trying to do the right thing that may not have the means to do it, to fix their homes. We really want to go after what we've consistently seen, companies, out of state, out of city owners who aren't seeing what the disinvestment does on that block day to day, right? And that's who we're really focused on. And once this passes, the laws that we will propose will be such, but they will go through the robust public engagement process.
Right. So what I think we can take away from all of these very informational answers, that these do one thing, and one thing most importantly is empower you all, the citizens. One, first by passing these and implementing, and two, empowering you through your alderpersons, through the Board of Aldermen, through the legislative process in the city of St. Louis, to see what this looks like to make better and create better for our communities and for our neighborhoods, block by block, right? And so with that, that's the conclusion of the questions that we received prior, but now we want to open it up to you all here present with us today, or if you have somebody that might have reached out to you and said, hey, can you ask this question for me? We have microphones. I'm not sure if any forms have been turned in, but if not, please feel free to step up to the microphone there, or we can have someone bring it to you if you raise your hand. And there's no bad questions. You can ask us anything. Thank you. The microphone is just to your right back there if you're not able to get it. Okay, I was going to say we can bring it to you.
This is not so much a question, but I have a little concern when you've been talking about the big companies owning vacant property. This church in 1976 started a not-for-profit housing group in Skinkard of Oliver. And when the developers came in, we were the only owners of occupied property on Nina Place for a number of years until developers came in and rehabbed the condos there. We then moved north of Del Mar up on Etzel. And over the years, Cornerstone has rehabbed 8, and 7 of those were vacant, vandalized apartment buildings on Etzel in the 59 and 6000 blocks of Etzel. But in the middle of that block, we have a woman who lives in California who is constantly paying just a little bit of her property taxes to keep it out of the tax auction. It's listed every year in the tax auction, but a little bit's paid off before the auction. There's another man who lives in California who owns a building behind the Cornerstone office on Suburban. And again, he pays a little bit of taxes, but has a vacant, vandalized building that isn't maintained. And so I don't want you just going after corporations. We need tools to go after these small owners who think that they're sitting on a gold mine, but they live somewhere else and ignore their property in St. Louis.
Thank you. That was good. Did you want to respond, Alderman?
Sure, thank you, sir. I would say that that is actually a lot of what we're seeing, and I don't know if you've, so I work closely with, we've got Tower Grove CDC in the 6th Ward, and they work a lot with legal services, and I don't know if you've connected with them, but they do a lot of lawsuits for situations like this, and that's actually how part of how Proposition V came about, because we've seen, I mean, it's not just for corporations, right? Like part 1, the first step is changing this so we can look at more laws, but like what we're seeing is basically speculators, and speculators of all types, right? And the issue is the people who live or are near the neighborhoods know what it's like, but the people who aren't around don't see it every day. So yes, I don't think we want to necessarily, we want to find ways to stop the people who are skirting, who are getting outside this loophole, and this is one way of doing it. And if you're not connected with legal services, I can I can connect you later on.
I'll vouch for Gordon and say he's very connected with the work that he's done for decades here in this West End area and through the CDC and through the church. And I think that was a good way to also mention that a lot of this came from your collaboration with legal services of Eastern Missouri, and that they are working with it every step of the way. So thank you, Alderman Velazquez. Sir?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a native of St. Louis, and I was coming to ask a question about Proposition S. I have been in the homeless community here in St. Louis since I was 14. I'm still technically in that community. I'm 31 now, so over 15 years. And I have seen the services for the homeless change, and I do understand that it's for affordable housing. And I've understood being on the public housing waiting list, which takes a year, and if you're actually homeless, and you're sitting outside somewhere in St. Louis and you have a government phone, they'll ask you how you have a government phone or tell you need to get a job. And people don't understand sometimes that, in order to get a job, nowadays I have to have a phone and I have to have an address. And if I don't have an address, I can't get a job. And if I do somehow get a job, I have to have bus fare and things like that. And we've had homeless services here in this city that's opted into doing things. And there are facilities like Catholic Charities that'll give you a razor and give you toothpaste. And I'm not opposed to going to the Del Mar Loop, and I actually bathe in the fountain there at the post office sometimes. But as I'm looking at Proposition S, because I was a gifted student at University City, so I'm not unintelligent. I just came up in a family that was on welfare. My mom put herself in school, and I refused to ask a lady with 5 kids to house me. And she's actually in the city of Memphis, and she's teaching, but she does have 5 kids, and she has grandkids. And my father was technically classified as a felon, and he technically can't get a job because if you're a felon, you can't even get your own apartment. So it's hard for him, no matter how good he is at carpentry, no matter how difficult or unfortunate the circumstances of being an inner city kid that people feels like isn't really intelligent. They're stereotyped upon him to not be eligible to do the things that he does, still remanded to be remedial in the eyesight of the general population because he went to Beaumont. But today I'm wondering, and if you don't know, it's fine because I do plan on going to the housing meeting tomorrow at 11 at City Hall. But I was coming to ask that, in the 3% that the city is requesting to bring in through Proposition S, if that is going towards the homeless community directly or as affordable housing for individuals that is stated to be at least under the, Missouri bracket for being on the middle class range, which what is approximately $50,000 or $60,000 a year. So if you're making a teacher salary or a police officer salary starting, which is really unfortunate for teachers and police officers if it's $30,000 a year, and I do believe that's pretty low because of how much is a house and how much is a 20-year loan, and if a regular house is $500,000, and in 20 years I'm barely making that, how in the world am I going to get something? So I do understand for affordable housing does go towards the people that are actually doing your job, which is the government here in the city or statewide or federal-wide. How much of that do you know? If you know, and it's okay if you don't know, is going that to the people that are actually sleeping in those tents in front of City Hall or that sleeps at the Del Mar Loop like me. Because if you don't have anything, thank God I went to New York and I get $1,000 a month for being on SSI, and they do give that to people for medical reasons sometimes, and they do request that people don't get that taken away from them. And I have seen people, unfortunately, here state that things outside of their demographic of work, such as being a psychiatric therapist, tell somebody that they're not a psychiatric therapist for, that they're not taking their medicine, when all you really have to do is go to therapy and talk to somebody or have a pet or do music therapy. You don't really have to take a pill. And if you do psychiatric therapy, you can say they don't really have to take medicine. And somebody that's there and doesn't do that job, tell them they're not taking medicine because they don't see a pill or they're not getting something prescribed and take that from them. Luckily, New York is saying, you can't do that because he actually got that here in New York, and we're not going to change his address until you give him an address. How much of that is going towards people that are actually sleeping in the park? Because not everybody can get to New York, and luckily I did get to New York and I'm back, and I'm still in my circumstances, and by the time the 10th comes around, there's nothing left. But
That's an
I do feel
excellent question.
Yeah.
It's really an excellent question, and I have a little bit of good news for you. So I want to read the entire ballot summary here. So it's asking if we can put the 3% of the nightly rate on short-term rentals. And then it says with at least 50% of such proceeds to be deposited in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the remaining such proceeds to fund other affordable housing initiatives such as relocation assistance or eviction defense provided by the Department of Human Services to prevent homelessness and promote and advance affordable housing in the city. So what I want to be clear about is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund does currently fund some homeless services. When you're looking at permanent supportive housing and things like that, which we know is part of the type of housing that we need. The other 50% of it can go to programs that are run by the Department of Human Services for the city, which is what does our homeless services. And we know as a city that we need to do better when it comes to our unhoused community, that we've unfortunately seen a lot of cuts in federal and state money locally over the years, which means that as a city, we have to step up and provide our own funding streams to be able to bridge that gap. So the intent behind this money is yes, it does support half of it has to go to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but the other half is specifically looking at investing in those programs that are going to help get folks off the streets and into permanent housing, into supportive housing or transitional housing if that's what they need, so that we're kind of funding and providing services for that entire spectrum of needs. So great question.
That was a great question, sir. And I also want to make sure that you connect with Slate, the vendor, the table out there, Slate, and the staff that's here, because again, I talked about the work that they're doing there, and they have tailored workforce programs for our unhoused neighbors that not only you can benefit, but you can share with your network as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Don't all run to the mic at once. Sure.
So I guess this is just a traffic question, just multiple frustrations I'm sure everyone's experienced about just how crazy the traffic is. And just recently I've noticed that there's like roving gangs of people on dirt bikes and ATVs, and it seems to be a little bit of a new thing, and I've stood at the intersections where, they make sure that everyone gets through. This was in front of the Amico sign, and I think last year the Moonlight Ramble basically got canceled because they couldn't control the route, and I know that it's a complex problem. I'm just kind of curious as to what might be done about that and just other traffic nihilism, I'll call it.
That's a great question. I'll chime in and then maybe hand it to Alderman Browning. So what we know is that to address traffic violence, there's basically three things that we need. We need the enforcement piece, we need the infrastructure piece, or the engineering piece, and we need the education piece. Missouri is, I think, the only state that does not require driver's education, which is one problem. But at the city, we actually allocated some funding to start our own driver's education program in partnership with the public schools, because we know we've got to be getting to people when they are first starting to use a vehicle to develop some of those good habits right away. Proposition T, I think, works on kind of the engineering end, right? It's going to help us to design safer streets and approach it from that point of view. And then earlier this year, the Board of Aldermen passed legislation to create an automated traffic enforcement system. And so these are things like red light cameras, speed cameras, things that can help us better track those occurrences in real time. Because what often happens is, somebody might call 911 and say, oh, there's this whole group of like people on a dirt bike at this intersection, and then by the time the police get there, they don't know where they went. And so it's often this just like trying to track them down and find them. And so the hope is that system will start to identify where the biggest problem areas are for that type of behavior, and B, actually give us a real-time enforcement mechanism. But we're also very intentional. We don't want that to end up being a predatory program that, preys on people who can't pay and things like that. And so as a part of that, we created this neighborhood traffic improvement fund. So that will go to fund if there's hardship situations. We can look at other ways, whether it's having to attend a driver's education class or something like that, rather than paying that fine. But fines and fees that are collected will go into this neighborhood traffic safety fund that will help to fund safety improvements on non-arterial roads. And the reason we did it that way is because with the ARPA dollars, we've allocated over $40 million in infrastructure money to address safety issues on most of our north-south thoroughfares throughout the entire city. But we know that there's a lot of smaller roads throughout our neighborhoods that really need those type of traffic calming measures as well. And so that fund is intended to be able to fund those types of improvements, so that we're focusing holistically on how do we design safer streets, how do we add some enforcement to make sure that we're actually able to hold accountable the perpetual bad actors. I live off of Gravois in South City, and you can hear the motorbikes every night starting around 10 p.m. and they just zoom and zoom and zoom. And then, that last piece, making sure that we create a mechanism for education, whether it's people who have broken the law and we want to help them develop better habits going forward, or whether it's that new driver that we need to understand how they need to behave on the road from the time they get their license.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything to add, really. Just the 3 E's are really the approach to traffic safety that we see work in every country that uses it. So that engineering, education, and enforcement. And when we talk enforcement, like President Green mentioned, it doesn't necessarily mean those dangerous interactions between police officers and people. We don't want to put officers in harm's way, and we don't want to put people in harm's way. Cameras are a great way to avoid that. So they're actually a really safe way. We've seen cities like Baltimore that instituted red light cameras saw a 15% reduction in crashes. So 15% doesn't sound like a huge number, but if it's your mother, your brother, your friend, or your wife, that's important. So we're doing what we can with what we have. It's tough in this state because the state of Missouri doesn't seem to care about this. They don't require driver's education. They don't really give us a lot of money to do good improvement projects, which is why we're taking matters into our own hands and trying to change the structures that we work with so that we can really focus on what matters out there, which is the safety of you on our streets.
And I just want to jump in, if that's all right, and just echo what both President Green and Alderman Browning said. I think it's not a short answer to your question, but I think it's important. I think what you're hearing from this board here, and my colleagues, is that there are some structural things that we're trying to change in the government, and just like infrastructure, it's slow moving. But I think especially with traffic and some of the bigger, expensive, naturally citywide issues that we have to address, like President Green was explaining, with streets that go across wards that should be funded across wards. We really have to look at the how, and that's what this board is doing. And I know Alderman Browning and President Green's office is really taking a big lead on that. So I guess I would just say why it is frustrating. I would say just keep watching and looking, and I think hopefully asking us questions and advocating for when those changes. I think you're going to keep seeing changes like this, like a Department of Transportation and things. We're trying to push to making more holistic, taking a more holistic approach and just as a citizen resident, you know, thinking about that, supporting it, and telling your neighbors about it.
Thank you. Ma'am?
You may have answered this question, but will the red light cameras pick up, first of all, people who have paper tags that are like 6 years old, that have expired years ago? Secondly, I see so many people just ignore a red light. I've told guests when they come into the city, sit at the stoplight, let them honk behind you, make sure there's not someone running a red light or you'll be T-boned. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone zoom right in front of me when there was a green light for me. And I just, you know, I don't know how if the red lights will capture that, running red lights, that would be wonderful. But if they have a paper tag that's from 2019, does that hinder that process?
That's a great question. So I'll address the paper tag question first. So the state of Missouri, again, didn't help us here for the longest time. The state did this very backwards thing where they'd sell you a car and then they'd tell you to go register it later. And a lot of people don't do that, or they go to register it and they find, oh my gosh, this $30,000 car I just bought has a huge registration fee and sales tax. So what the law changed to, I think last year, was signed by the governor, so it's going into effect. It's just going to take a couple years to actually implement, is that dealers will now be able to start issuing that registration and sales tax and building it into the cost of the loan. Which means that you'll be able to finance that through the loan, so it won't be such a big shock. You can split it out over monthly payments. You can do all sorts of things. So that will help get rid of all those tags out there that you see from people who just simply can't pay or are a little surprised by the bill. I think you'll see a huge reduction just in that alone. Of course, what will be left are the people who are intentionally breaking the law. But the good news there is that if it's not every other car that has a temp tag, there'll be able to be more enforcement on that end as well. So we're hoping that that change sees a reduction in numbers and then we can enforce the rest of it. Then the other side of that is the red light cameras. They will be able to capture cars as they go through. Part of what you might remember from 2014 is that the red light cameras got declared as unconstitutional and we had to put them away because we weren't identifying the driver who was driving the car, and we weren't having an actual police officer issue the ticket. It was just an automated system where it sent someone a ticket. Well, that's not due process, that's not constitutional, so those got put aside, but we're back. We have a constitutional plan this time. Not only has camera technology improved a ton since 2014, we can now identify the driver, we can now identify other characteristics about the car, and we're also having an actual officer issue the ticket. So we're going to be careful to make sure we're placing these cameras in places where we're not targeting specific populations, but we're really putting them in the places where what are the most dangerous intersections. And then we can use the data from those cameras to track down the things that are really the people that are still violating the law. Then the last piece of that is, again, the infrastructure piece. So one common thing I see, I think we've probably all seen it driving around the city, is you'll be stopped at the stoplight and someone will use the dedicated left turn lane to just speed around you and run through the light. It feels extremely dangerous. That's because it is. But the good news here is that when we do better road design, we can fix that. So one thing that's going to be happening on Kings Highway, for instance, as they go down and they repave it with that ARPA money and they make sure that they add traffic calming measures, is that at the intersection, I'm just using this as an example, we're getting traffic calming everywhere, but as an example, at Waterman and Kings Highway, there's going to be, on the north side of that intersection, a pedestrian island. That means that, and then there'll be a dedicated left turn lane on the other side. So in this case, the dedicated left turn lane won't be able to be used as a speed around lane because there'll be a concrete island there that they'd run straight into. So safer road design can keep people from running red lights, as well as enforcement. And then the last thing I'll say is, let's use more roundabouts, because you cannot run a roundabout.
That could be a whole message, a theme. Cannot run a roundabout.
Roundabouts 2027.
Okay. Do we have any other questions while we're here?
I'll ask another one. Having all of you here is wonderful. I'm concerned about the 911 system in the city. And I know there are plans, but it's several years ahead before we really have an updated, state-of-the-art 911. And it seems to me we have all this money. Why not put it toward 911? Because there are a lot of us elderly in the city.
That's a great question, and there's some good news because some of this money has gone toward the 911 call center. And actually, just last week, the building permit was issued to begin construction on that new facility. So it is coming along. We had a little bit of a hiccup because there was $10 million we were expecting from the state that we ended up not getting. But we've been able to address that locally, and so that project is underway, and it will take a couple of years to construct, but that once that gets up and going, it will be great to have, I think, all of those call center operators in one place. But in the meantime, we have made some pretty substantial strides. I would say a year and a half ago, 911 was getting like only about 60% of the calls within the national, I think it's like 10 seconds. They need to be answered within 10 seconds. And only about 60% of calls were meeting that threshold, which is abysmal. And now we're up close to 90% that are meeting that threshold because we were able to do some pretty significant raises to call center operators and some sign-in bonuses as well that help to get those staffing levels up. And now that we have the staff that we need, we're seeing those call times be closer to where they need to be, and then once we get that infrastructure built, it will make it even better. So it's like everything in city government, it always takes longer than we would like it to, but having that, when I saw that building permit get issued last week, I like did this happy dance of like, yes, finally. So it's in progress.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to have one last question. What I know for sure is when you create spaces like this, sometimes inevitably later on someone thinks about, darn, I should have asked that question. So I want to make sure you know that anything you think of later, please reach out to any of us or down at the Board of Alderman offices, and we will make sure to respond, because again, the goal for us is to make sure that you are fully educated, empowered, and ready to cast your vote. Ma'am?
Asked a question about the infrastructure, but I wanted to ask about the two propositions there. I'm kind of confused. There are two propositions, Proposition 2 and Proposition 5. What is the difference between those two? Because one is for the Ozarks and one is for, they're both for education. And one is for the Ozarks.
Yes.
And the other one, 5 is, I think 5 is for the Ozarks and 2 is for here. I'm kind of confused. Why do you have two separate bills for education?
Related to gambling, yes.
Yeah, related to gambling.
Yeah. It is confusing. So
gambling.
One of them, I think, I want to make sure I get the numbers right here. I think it's Proposition 5 is asking basically whether voters will authorize an additional gaming license to basically make a new casino at Lake of the Ozarks. And because voters have to approve the issuing of a new license. So that is why that's very specific to Lake of the Ozarks. Proposition 2 is to legalize sports betting in the state of Missouri, and then they're proposing that the money that is generated from it then go to education in the state. What I will say, though, kind of my concern about Amendment 2 is that there's nothing in it that specifies that money has to be additional money that goes to education. It could very much be that it generates more money for education, but then through the budget process, the state legislature could decrease current funding and basically just supplant it with the new funding. And so that would be my concern about kind of Proposition 2 and whether we actually see that money go into education or not. But that's the difference between the two as I understand it. If anyone else has additional information on it.
I was just going to jump in on Proposition 5. I think that is more of a local issue. I think the folks in the Ozarks was asking for that, and I do know that NEA, the teachers union, has been a help in writing that, and they are more confident that with their kind of support on that, those funds from that area will go to education. I think compared to a lot of our concerns with Proposition 2, if those funds will actually go to education. So I think the Amendment 5 is a local thing that residents are asking for, and it only would affect kind of that Lake of the Ozarks area.
When I looked up too, when I got a little information.
You speak into the microphone so we can hear you.
I'm sorry. When I looked up the information on 2, to me it looks like that they're just going to be here and they're not going to pay any taxes, and the money is not going to be allotted for the school systems. 5 to me seems more plausible, because 2 to me, 2 is like they're coming here, they're going to get what they get, they're going to set it up, but you're not going to get anything out of it. Whereas 5, you can see the support and you can see the people who are behind it. But 2,
I think I just too want to clarify, just for the folks in the room, that those are state amendments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those they obviously go through a different process than what these amendments that we have at the city, right? And there's just a whole different process, how they get on the ballot and who's pushing them on the ballot or what entities are. It's just very different. So just
to
as
me
a
it
kind
seems
of,
like it's the same people, just two different bills, same people. Regardless of which one passes, they're gonna get it anyway. That's what it seems like to me when I read 2.
I don't want to comment too much because we're not. I'm saying because it's a state amendment. I think Alderman Aldridge is right that it's because of how the state law is written that sometimes things that are local issues end up on the state ballot because of how our laws are written. I think this is an example of that with the Ozarks one, but also the state amendments are just they're just a totally different process than what like these city ones are.
They're
So.
still on the ballot for us to vote for, right?
They
Yes.
are. They are.
Yes, they are.
That's
They
what
are.
I was going to talk
Yeah.
about. Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for your question. What I was going to talk about in closing, and we're not running right out the building. We're here till Pastor Mike said we can be here till 7:30, so we'll be able to be here for informal questions and comments. But I wanted to make sure you know that I've heard, I don't know if you guys have heard, that it's averaging about 15, 20 minutes to complete this ballot to vote. And that's people that go in educated and know how they are going to vote when they get there. So make your plan. When they say make your plan, that's so important. Plan for time and early voting. That's why it's going to be so key. And make sure you vote completely down ballot, as many things as you can. Don't leave anything out. And to your point and to our points here, even we were here to talk about these 4, but also you can go to things like League of Women Voters and our St. Louis City Board of Elections, their website. You can get also more detailed information on all of the entire ballot as well. So that I like to tell my constituents, I want you to be ready and know how you're going to vote when you park it. So you don't have to think about it. You don't have to get those pieces of paper passed to you and you try to figure anything out. Know how you're going to vote when you park it. So with that, I didn't know if any of my colleagues had any closing remarks, and then we'll ask Pastor Mike to come back up and close us out, and we'll be here to fellowship until 7:30.
I think the only thing I do want to add, since we're on the voting, if anybody else wants to jump in, you can vote. No early. I can never get it right. Early, no excuses, absentee voting. You can start voting on October 22nd,
Yes.
right? There's a list. If you don't have the list, we can help you find the list. The other great thing about the city is that on election day, you can vote anywhere in the city, which I think is amazing. They actually added a bunch of new polling places. So I've got a couple more in the 6th Ward. I see a couple of 6th Ward people here. But they added a bunch more outside of the 6th Ward. So we'd be happy to stick around and share the information with you. But you can vote anywhere. As the Alder lady said, please print out your ballots and do your research before you go, but you have a lot of opportunity to take your time, and also we've tried to make it, I think, as the Board of Elections has done a really amazing job of trying to make it convenient for everybody. So if you're running errands in a different part of town, vote there. It's great, and you can get a printed ballot.
And one last thought I'd like to share is if you want more information, there are handouts at the table as you leave, just out in that lobby. So this is for Prop T. I know that my colleagues have ones for Prop V and B as well. So if you want more information, these are really, really educational. I might answer some of the unanswered questions you might have, or if you just want to take them home and share them with somebody that wasn't here tonight. These are all very important, and as we mentioned, they're at the end of this very long ballot, so make sure you go all the way down and don't skip any questions, because there's other important things like Amendment 3, legalizing the right to abortion in our state, very, very important, as well as Proposition A, which is $15 an hour minimum wage and paid sick leave for people. Believe it or not, people in this state do not have a right to sick leave right now. So really, really important ballot, besides just the president, which is the most important thing of all. But this is such an important ballot. I don't think I've ever seen a ballot this long, but that's because there's a lot of important stuff on it.
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you all for coming and staying this long and not leaving on us. Like my colleague said, it is a Monday. It's a little chilly out, but it's still beautiful weather. But the fact that you all are here to just get a little bit more informed about things on the ballot, it means the world to political folks like us up here. So thank you so much. Please, if you can, I think it's been said multiple times, if you can, 2 weeks before the election, go out and vote early. Like the Alderwoman said, it is a long ballot, and the wait time is very long. So if you can get in there and you can vote early, please do. Make sure you take a friend, and also take that opportunity to look at the ballot ahead of time, because outside of the propositions that are up here, and I'm asking each and every one of you to vote yes on Prop B, yes on Prop V, yes on Prop T, and yes on Prop S. That's the way they are in order of the ballot when you get towards the end. But also take your time to get educated on the other ballot initiatives. There are some very important ones out there. And thank you for having me tonight.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and spending your Monday evening with us. We do have handouts. We have one handout out there too that has information on all 4 of the propositions on it, as well as all of the early voting locations on it too. So that is out in the vestibule, so keep that with you, and when early voting happens in another week, I can't believe that, right. Then you'll know exactly where you can go and get your vote in. Remember to vote the entire ballot. It is long, but oftentimes those propositions that are at the end of the ballot have the most direct impact on your lives, and so we want to make sure that everybody's going all the way to the end of that ballot. But really, thank you for coming out this evening and for spending your evening with us. We have all been out at a million neighborhood meetings, giving these same presentations, talking to folks about what's on the ballot. So if you have a neighborhood organization or group that you are affiliated with who would like some voter education between now and Election Day on the city propositions in particular, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will do our best to make it there, either all of us or one of us, to help educate the public about what's at the end of your ballot. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause.
Before the pastor comes, can we also give our moderator a round of applause?
Well, thanks, y'all. It was really a privilege to have you all here. Thank you for giving your time, and thank you all for coming. It was a great blessing to us to get to host this meeting. So let me close in a quick prayer. Lord, would you please bless our leaders as they go from here and continue this great work, continue to go through a lot of meetings and a lot of tension coming up to Election Day, I'm sure. Would you please be with them and their families, and bless us as we go from here. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you all.